Hojo, can you speak just a little louder for some of us with the aging ears?
Sure, I have no trouble speaking loudly. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good. We're going to chant the opening Dharma verse, and then we'll begin with a formal introduction. The unsurpassed, profound, and wondrous Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. Now we can see and hear it, accept and maintain it. May we unfold the meaning of the Tathagata's truth. So, John, if you will give your formal introduction to Susan, we will appreciate that very much.
Thank you, Hojo. Good morning. Can everyone hear me? If you can't, put your hand to an ear if you're not hearing me. Okay. Good morning. I'm honored to introduce our guest speaker. Susan Moon is a writer and lay Zen teacher in the Soto lineage of Suzuki Roshi. Her books include the memoir, This is Getting Old, the groundbreaking collection, The Hidden Lamp, stories from 25 centuries of awakened women with Florence Caplow, and most recently, Alive Until You're Dead, Notes on the Home Stretch. Susan lives in Berkeley, California, and she practices at the Berkeley Zen Center and with the Everyday Zen Sangha. Norman Fischer entrusted her as a lay teacher in 2005. For many years, she has taught and led Zen and writing retreats in the Bay Area, around the country, and internationally. Susan, we welcome you.
Thank you very much, John. Thanks for your help in getting this organized. Can you all hear me okay too? Okay. And so it's great to be here and to see the Atlanta Zen Center, which looks like a very nice, large, light space. And I particularly want to thank you, Steve or Ishiryo, for inviting me to speak, and then again to thank you, John, for making all the arrangements so patiently with me. So when Steve invited me to speak today, he suggested that I might talk about my first book, which is called The Life and Letters of Tofu Roshi. And it was published in 1988, if you can believe that, 36 years ago. I think that's right. Yeah, 36 years ago. So, and I'm also going to speak about my most recent book, Alive Until You're Dead, and make some references to both of those books and read you a little bit from each one. So it's kind of fun for me to have that parenthesis around my Zen thinking and writing. But I was particularly pleased by the invitation to speak about Tofu Roshi, or to refer to it, because it was so long ago and it's kind of in the ancient archives of history now, and I don't very often, haven't spoken of it for a long time, but I do have some affection for it, and I'm happy to bring the teachings of Tofu Roshi forward again. So I'm going to start with Tofu Roshi and then go on to Alive Until You're Dead. Tofu Roshi is sort of an imaginary Zen teacher, but really he's a very real presence in my mind. And the book came out of my early practice, so part of it, most of it, is questions and answers. It's column of Tofu Roshi's answers to people's Zen questions. And I wrote both the questions and the answers, but don't tell anybody that. So actually, a few other people wrote some of the questions now and then. It was in a column for a while, a column in a magazine called Garlic, the Breath of the People, which was something that I was involved in. And it was also, the column was also in Inquiring Mind a number of times. So anyway, then it became a book. And so I speak in the voice of Susan Ichi-Su Moon as the student of Tofu Roshi. And the book is written in that voice. And Tofu Roshi was the Zen master at the No Way Zen Center. And I'm going to read a couple of examples of his letters. And I do want to say that they're very silly. And I also really think that they're also serious in some odd way, and that the questions in the book actually came out of my own practice. They were some version of something that was a real question of mine. And so I hope there's some depth to them as well as foolishness. And I also think that humor itself is just extremely helpful to us, especially now. So I will just, there's a narrative part about Tofu Roshi and my relationship, but I'm not going to read from that. I'm just going to read from some of the letters. So here is one. Dear Tofu Roshi, when I meditate, I seem to exhale more completely than I inhale. And consequently, by the end of the meditation period, I feel quite deflated. What do you think I should do? Signed, Prudence, Bird Whistle. Dear Prudence, proper breathing technique is widely misunderstood. You are not alone in having trouble with it. From your letter, it sounds as though you may be making a common mistake, breathing out more times than you are breathing in. This is why we recommend counting breaths. Only by counting can you be completely sure you are exhaling and inhaling the same number of times. One of my students uses golf counters for this. With her left hand, she enumerates inhalations, while with her right, she takes account of exhalations. At the end of the period, she checks to make sure the numbers on the two counters are the same. If there is any discrepancy, she takes an extra moment to even things up, adding the indicated number of exhalations or inhalations. But it is best to alternate whenever possible. Breathe in once, breathe out once, and then go all the way back to the beginning of the cycle and repeat. This is a basic principle of Zen. Now we have another one. Dear Tofu Roshi, I can't get my dog to stay on his meditation cushion. Could I just tie Zafu onto the dog for 40 minutes a day? Dear Doggone, when your dog won't sit, which should you tie, the dog or the Zafu? Practicing with this question will teach your dog the meaning of shikantaza. Sit, just sit. There's several sections in this book, and I'm reading from different sections, but there's a section on how to meditate, on proper form and ritual, finding your true path, and so on. So now I'll read one more from Tofu Roshi, and then I think I'll Dear Tofu Roshi, why is there something rather than nothing? Signed, Antimatter. Dear Auntie, you have probably heard the wise old saying, time is nature's way of keeping everything from happening at once. Similarly, something manifests in order to keep nothing from taking up all the space. In this matter which you present, nothing could be more material to our understanding of what is than what is not. We must learn to see things as they are and to see nothing as it isn't. In substance, nothing matters. There's a little bit of wisdom from Tofu Roshi, and I will come back to him briefly at the end. But I want to move on to Alive Until You're Dead and to some thoughts about aging. The book Alive Until You're Dead really takes up the matter of mortality as well as aging. My earlier book about aging was called This Is Getting Old, which Steve mentioned, and that's really focused on aging and something I was getting concerned about and noticed that I was doing some time ago. And then Alive Until You're Dead focuses also on my sense of the importance of really acknowledging our mortality and how death meditation and considering our death can be a very helpful and deepening aspect of our practice. And there's a Zen practice and Zen koans and Zen teachings, as you know, there's a lot of references to death and questions about death and stories about the deaths of Zen masters, like the one I particularly like. This is a koan in the Hidden Lamp, actually. There's a story about an ancient Zen master who knew he was nearing his death, and he asked his Zen friends, did anybody ever die standing up? And they said, oh, yes, that's happened. And he said, well, did anybody ever die standing on their head? And nobody could think of that happening. So he stood on his head, and then he died standing on his head. And his body remained in that position like a column. And the monks were trying to, give him proper burial, but they couldn't move his body. It was just stuck there upside down. And so somebody called his sister, who was a wise Zen teacher herself. She was his older sister, and she came over to see him. And oh, by the way, it was noted in the story that his robes did not fall down with gravity, so that he was quite modestly attired still, even upside down. Anyway, she came to see him and she said, oh my goodness, baby brother, you're just as mischievous and just as much of a pest as you were as a child. And she gave him a little push and the body fell over. And then they did proper burial for him. So that's an example of Zen studies on death. It doesn't really matter what position you die in. That's what I take to be the meaning of that. So, but I do also talk about aging in Alive Until You're Dead, and all of us are aging. Even if we're really young, we're getting older. But looking at the screen, it looks like some of us have gotten further with that project than others. But I think the things that I'm reading about have pretty much application to people whatever age they are. So I want to, this particular one that I'm going to speak of, this chapter is particularly relevant to aging people and old people. And I want to say that I think there are, one of the things that we have to do is figure out how do we adapt to getting old, and how can we have some dignity about this process. So there are, I've said that there are 4 things to do as we age. And one of them, the first one is to observe. The second one is to adapt. The third one is to let go. And the fourth one is to accept. But I'll say a little bit more about those. So first of all, observing is essential because we want to see things as they are. We want to be present where we are, and we need to just say to ourselves, oh, this is how it is right now, which is a kind of a maxim for me. This is how it is right now. Just non-judgmentally noticing how the words are flying away, noticing how the sense of direction is gone, noticing how the hip hurts, whatever it is. This is how it is right now. I'll read a little from the beginning of this chapter. It's hard to get old. Some things get easier the longer you practice them, like parking the car or peeling a potato, but not getting old, because the longer you do it, the older you get. There are losses, big and small, of physical strength, of proper nouns, of a sense of direction, of keys and reading glasses, of bowel regularity, of your driver's license, of hearing, of loved ones. Some of us lose more than others, but everyone loses something. Everything keeps changing, as Buddha repeatedly pointed out. And just when you've adapted to one loss, you can get sideswiped by another. You don't know what's going to happen next. But impermanence is good news too. Occasionally, things change for the better. Even if you're old and getting older, you can't assume that tomorrow will be worse than today. Something wonderful might happen quite unexpectedly, or you might collaborate with reality to make something wonderful happen. You might take a walk in Tilden Park in the hills behind Berkeley and see the first bluebirds you've ever seen in your life, a whole flock of them flying over a field out of the blue. This happened to me not long ago. So the first rule is observe, and that's just fairly straightforward. And I'm not going to read from that, but just keep on taking note of when it is that you are suffering from something difficult, or keep taking note also of the times when maybe you feel some wisdom from, or some sense of, oh, well, it's okay like this. It's really okay. And that's a good type of awareness that I think comes with aging and comes with Zen practice as well. The idea that this is how it is right now. So the second one after observing is, once you've noticed what the situation is, you have to adapt to it. And adapting is very key, of course, to getting older. And we have to adapt in all kinds of ways. Like if if our driver's license gets taken away from us, or we can't drive anymore, you have to figure out ways to get places on public transportation. You can join with your friends and do a lot of carpooling, which I do. I drive sometimes nearby, but I don't like to take long drives. And I have had a very nice time getting to know people who've been giving me rides to Everyday Zen meetings in Marin County, for example. And or I like taking public transportation a lot and sort of seeing all the people that I'm living on the planet with, all different kinds of people. So adapting turns out to be very satisfying often. When I'm cooking, making a recipe, and I want to keep track of all the ingredients, I've taken to getting all the ingredients out and lining them up along the counter in order of using them. And then as I'm following the recipe, it's very easy to just go along from the salt to the cinnamon or whatever, just in order. And I don't have to interrupt myself constantly as I'm cooking. So those are some examples of adapt. Then the third one is a little bit more challenging perhaps, which is to let go. So you let go of driving at night, and you let go of things you can't do anymore. The Theravadan teacher Ajahn Sumedho says that you can describe the Buddhism in 6 words: let go, let go, let go. So it can be hard to let go, but it can also be very positive. You can let go of things that you don't really want to hold on to anymore, and you can finally admit it and think, well, this isn't really something I want to be doing anymore. I'm going to let go of this. Some things are hard to let go of, even though you want to let go of them. For me, letting go of regrets is a very important practice, which I continue to do as I approach the end of my life. And I hope to have a clean slate by the time I die, but I might not quite make it there. I don't know. In terms of holding on to regrets, not acknowledging past actions that caused harm, just as we did this morning before we started in the chant. That's very important. But acknowledging those misdeeds is different than walking around regretting them. And I have a few things that I won't bother to tell you about that I really regret in my life, having to do often with my children. But I've noticed that sticking to these regrets or holding on to these regrets and coming back to them and sort of torturing myself with them is really like walking along all bent over, dragging a bunch of heavy chains over my shoulder behind me on the ground, and they're dragging along and they're really heavy. And one time I just suddenly saw it that way. I was sitting actually, and I suddenly saw myself dragging these chains, and I just said to myself, drop the chains of regret, drop the chains of regret. And I just let go in my mind, and I sat up straight, and I felt so much lighter, and the metaphor really helped me. And for a while, I felt so free and light. Now I'm noticing that maybe I'm picking up some other chains or something. I'm not completely free of them, but it feels really good to think of it that way. So anyway, that's the letting go. And then the 4th one is accept. And that comes in where there's something that you really can't let go of in a way. It's maybe your back hurts every time you wake up, and it's painful, and you can't just let go of that pain. You can let go of your own nurturing of it, but you may not be able to let go of some of the circumstances you're in that you would rather not be in. And at that point, what you need to do is accept. And in terms of accepting, various teachers have said to me, particularly Norman Fischer, that our biggest problem, when I've gone to him with a problem and said, well, what should I do about this? And he says, well, your biggest problem is that you think you shouldn't have a problem. So that's about accepting that we do have problems, and that's how it is. This is how it is right now. Again, I have this problem that isn't going to go away, so I'm just going to keep working with it. So then, as I was writing out or thinking about these 4 steps, observe, adapt, let go, and accept, I realized that all of these problems that we get as we age there can be many different kinds of problems and issues and discomforts and disabilities, losses, many losses. I also realized that no matter how much I lose, no matter what physical abilities and mental abilities I lose, if I can't really lose, hopefully I can't lose the ability to love, and that as long as I can love, I'm okay. That's the essential thing. So I added a fifth thing. After those 4 steps, I added love as a verb. Just keep on loving. And I'll read you the last piece from that chapter about love. If you can't do much of anything else, you can love. I think of my father going swimming with his 2 young sons from his late second marriage. He had 3 strikes against him. He was old, he was blind, and his legs were swollen and purple from cancer. I was middle-aged, visiting him in Cambridge from California, and one day I drove the 3 of them to the public swimming pool. I used to go help his wife sometimes, or she would go away, and I would go help stay with my very much younger brothers and help my father. When I was a child, that same father had been sighted and athletic. Now I watched him and the little boys come out of the men's locker room in their swimming trunks and walk across the slippery, wet tile at the edge of the pool, my father with crutches. Please don't slip, please don't fall, I prayed. My father, our father, put down his crutches, turned, and climbed slowly down the ladder into the pool. Determined to be a good dad, he called to the kids to jump in. He was a very good dad to these little kids. He winced when his 6-year-old crashed into his open arms, but my little brother didn't see it, and my father didn't make a noise. Then, joined by the 9-year-old, they played together, throwing a ball back and forth, my father finding the ball by its splash or its tap on his torso. I'm guessing that his pain was displaced by the joy of swimming with his bouncy boys. It was about a year before he died. Finally, getting old is about practicing love. Loving is something an old person can do at least as well as a young one. Bad short-term memory can't keep me from loving. Not knowing how to get to the knitting store can't keep me from loving. What I really want to say is that whatever else I lose, I'll be okay as long as I can love. Here is another section about something that I think is a very important aspect of getting old, is to consider how do we interact with the world and the issues in the world, the problems of the world. How do we make a contribution? How do we still want to make a contribution for justice, for peace, for making a real contribution to making the world a positive, more positive place, or to support the life around us that's so precious and seems so threatened sometimes. And so I'll read a little bit from this essay. The odds look bleak for life on planet Earth. I'm grateful to Zen practice for training me to forget the odds and attempt the impossible. For 45 years, I've been chanting what we Zen practitioners call the Bodhisattva vows at every Zen service. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to follow it or to become it. So a person who vows over and over to save all sentient beings can't really quail at working for environmental, economic, and racial justice, can she? Even if she is old, if I'm going to save all sentient beings, if I say I'm going to work on that, then, that's a long way to go. I probably won't manage that one, but I can make a start at it. So in that context of our vows, we can see that this is the constant restatement of an intention, which is what it is, that these vows are beautiful because they're intentions, and because we can't keep them. if we could keep them and achieve them, then we wouldn't have anything to vow to do, but we can't achieve them. They are endless. So luckily for us, they are infinite, and that gives us the opportunity to continue to make that vow and to have that intention to save all sentient beings. So for old people, though, in a literal everyday way, it might be harder to do. Now I'm thinking about sort of activism in the world, which is something that's been important to me. It might be harder to do some of the things that you're used to do because you're not as active. And so it's still possible. There's still things that you can do instead of going to demonstrations and committing civil disobedience or whatever. I can write letters, I can write postcards, I can help edit things, I can go to a demonstration and stay in the shade, or go home a little early if I get dizzy or something. So those things, you can make those changes, but also, and I also want to acknowledge that I do not believe that every single person has to get up and go to a demonstration or spend a lot of time writing letters to elected representatives or whatever. I mean, I think it's okay for old people. I think it's fine for old people to say, well, I'm really tired now, and I'm very grateful for my life, and I've done what I can, and now it's my turn to really rest and take care of myself. And I value that approach as well. So this is not a lecture about how you should all get out and do something, but for myself, it's a way I help myself to think, well, I can still make a contribution, and that there are things I can do that are appropriate to my age. And one of the things to remember is just that I do everything slower. I can do a lot of the same things, but I just have to do them slower. It takes more time to do them. And that, it's somehow, I think it's encouraging to young people to see old people still manifesting a concern for the world, and we can take our lead from young people. I mean, they are taking the lead. We can take our signals from them and follow them and their ideas and learn from them, and they can also learn from us and our experience. And I think modeling the idea that even though I'm old, I'm still interested in what's happening out there is very important and helpful to young people. And I think it's also good in a Sangha to have a way to come together in a Sangha with others, and sensing ourselves as doing part of our bodhisattva practice. This is our bodhisattva practice that we're all vowing to do and to follow, and doing it together gives us more courage and more strength. I think that things have changed so much, and the world is changing so rapidly, and getting old makes me see how things are not exactly linear. And maybe it's partly because I've been alive for 82 years to observe, but things don't go in a straight line. And so it's okay to act in a more collage-like way, to not know. We don't know what's going to happen. That's very essential. And we know by this time at our age, we really know that we don't know what's going to happen, because so many things have happened that we didn't know were going to happen. And also, I think there's more of an acknowledgement of circularity, of that things in general do not go in a straight line, and Native American cultures and other cultures have much more recognition that it's not just a matter of plodding along, making progress from a bad place to a good place. It doesn't work that way. So let's just join in with whatever rituals and movements and what that we can in a spirit of being able to let go of our expectations and our assumptions of how things happen. So that's I didn't read from that chapter, but those are just some thoughts on aging and activism. And then there's one other piece that I want to go to from Alive Until You're Dead, which is on ancestors. And as we get old, we become more, or at least I have become more aware of ancestors, or the concept even of ancestors. And of course, Zen and Buddhism is very, very praises our ancestors and honors our ancestors with a lot of gratitude, which is it's not an attitude that I grew up with at all in my culture growing up. Old people and dead people were kind of not very interesting. And I didn't have a sense of all the gratitude that I should have had for all the people who came before me. And I think that's partly also being young. And in a way, it's maybe good that young people aren't concentrated on their ancestors. They're finding their own way of doing things in a wild new way. But as I got older and as I practiced Zen in particular, I became more aware of ancestors. And I'm going to read a little bit from this chapter. Zen people talk a lot about how great the Buddhist ancestors are. I used to take a dim view of the whole business of honoring ancestors. I loved my grandparents, but not because they were ancestors. When I first began to practice in my 30s, I was impatient with the emphasis on the lineage, a long list of dead men's names from India, China, and Japan. What did that have to do with me? About 15 years ago, thanks to pressure from women practitioners and our male allies, we began chanting the names of women ancestors as well as men in our informal Zen services, a historic turn. But in my early days, I thought the lineage a dusty business, like a pile of tattered diplomas on crumbling parchment having nothing to do with me or my life. Now I realize that the ancestors are my lifeblood. We are all made of the ancestors who came before us, those who bore us, and those who bore the ones who bore us, all the way back through the generations to great-grandmother and great-grandfather amoeba. Some of our ancestors may not have been admirable people, but we come from them too, whether we like them or not. People who are adopted may not know who their blood ancestors are, but we come not only from blood ancestors, but also from the people who raised us, who taught us to look both ways before we crossed the street and how to tie our shoes. I'm here because of all the teachers, the first grade teacher who taught me to read, the sixth grade science teacher who taught me the 10-point scale of hardness from talc to diamond, the high school and college teachers who helped me love Shakespeare and George Eliot. Come to think of it, Eliot and Shakespeare are themselves my ancestors, as is everyone who handed on the culture that shapes my consciousness without me even knowing it. I'm talking to you now thanks to the Homo sapiens who first used words, and their descendants who kept passing the language along until it got to me, language that organizes what I see and hear, dark, light, square, round, soft, and loud. I acknowledge the many people who have been robbed of knowing who their biological ancestors are because the link has been broken by slavery, genocide, war, displacement. There are also people who have been robbed of their cultural and spiritual ancestors as the past has been torn away from them, from their languages as well. There are people now who honor and receive guidance from the tree ancestors, the ocean ancestors, the mountain ancestors, and the star ancestors. And people have always had those ancestors, and we can honor them more than we used to in my culture. So when I was working with Florence Caplow on the book, The Hidden Lamp, stories from 25 centuries of awakened women, and we were bringing forward women ancestors, I'm in that process, I made a discovery about ancestors, which is that you can adopt whoever you want to as an ancestor. You don't get to choose your biological parents and grandparents, but when you're adopting ancestors, you get to invite people you admire, the teachers, historical figures, writers, and artists who have influenced you and encouraged you. You get to invite them to be your ancestors, and they're not going to turn you down. So that's a nice source of strength, too. The other side of honoring our ancestors is remembering that we ourselves will become ancestors, whether we like it or not. One of my favorite Zen texts is old Dogen's prayer, or Eihei Kosu Hotsugan Mon, in which he thanks our ancestors for their great compassion and care for us, and he assures us that we too will be Buddhas and ancestors. So I'll read this part of this prayer to you. Buddhas and ancestors of old were as we. We in the future shall be Buddhas and ancestors. Those who in past lives were not enlightened will now be enlightened. In this life, save the body, which is the fruit of many lives. Before Buddhists were enlightened, they were the same as we. Enlightened people of today are exactly as those of old. That's the prayer. We are inevitably, then, the ancestors of all who come after us, whether we have progeny or not. The respected sages of former times were human beings, with human feelings and foibles, too. Isn't this reassuring? They were stubborn or bossy or afraid. They burned the rice and spilled candle wax on the sutra book. They snuck out of the monastery in the middle of the night to do mischief. Whatever I've been and done some of those things, and Dogen says I'll be an enlightened ancestor even so. In the meantime, in this life, I need to take good care of my human body because whether or not it's the fruit of former lives lived by me, it's definitely the fruit of former lives lived by others. My life is the fruit of all my ancestors' lives, and my life is the fruit of the lives of the cows who gave the milk that made the yogurt I had for breakfast this morning, the fruit of the lives of the unhatched chickens and the eggs, of the carrots and beans, and even the fruit, the organic strawberries I put in the yogurt. So as not to waste all the lives that have donated themselves to my life, I take care of this body. And while I am here, I try to be fully here. I try to develop the mind of great compassion. I try to practice grandmother mind. So that's the last chapter I wanted to refer to from Alive Until You're Dead. But I'd like to end by just reread. Then I'm going to go back to Tofu Roshi for one more time. But I'd like to reread that prayer of Dogen's. Buddhas and ancestors of old were as we. We in the future will be Buddhas and ancestors. Those who in past lives were not enlightened will now be enlightened. In this life, which is the fruit of many lives, save the body, which is the fruit of many lives. Before Buddhists were enlightened, they were the same as we. Enlightened people of today are exactly as those of old. So we can take some comfort from that. I take a lot of comfort from that. We don't know what's going to happen, but we're going to be ancestors. We already are, and we can be practicing our best to be good ancestors already before we die. So I want to end with a little essay from Tofu Roshi. This is a transcription of a talk he gave. And it's called How to Give Up Self-Improvement. I want to talk to you today about the importance of giving up self-improvement. This is one of our hardest tasks as we train ourselves to follow the Buddha way. In this modern age, we are met at every turn by new and tempting opportunities to improve ourselves. Now, some of this is, you will actually notice, is dated, the technologies and things. This is actually a book that was published in 1988 when some things were different, noticeably different. But anyway, the main idea holds. In this modern age, we are met at every turn by new and tempting opportunities to improve ourselves. We are offered everything from workshops on how to be a better parent to classes in strengthening the quadriceps. We are so deeply habituated to this way of thinking that we do not even recognize it in ourselves. This is the great danger. How many of you first began to sit zazen with the hope that it would in some way make you a better person? For many of us, it may take years of hard practice before we are completely sure that we have hoped in vain. Buddhism teaches us that everything always changes, but we must finally admit that it does not necessarily change for the better. When old Bushwhack was still master at the monastery on Lazy Man Mountain, a young monk with flabby thighs said to him, "My mind dwells always on the 5 desires, which are food, sex, sleep, fame, and wealth. Last night, I ate all the lychee nuts in the monastery storeroom. How can I conquer my weaknesses and become a better person?" "You rice bag, you," snarled Bushwhack. "Who wants to be a good person? Lie down without delay and take a rest until the feeling passes. Take a nap. How can you be awakened if you are not asleep?" Zafu has given us this verse. The old rice bag and the young rice bag grumble on Lazy Man Mountain. How they annoy each other with their unpleasant personalities. The young rice bag falls asleep. When he awakens, he will still be a sickly rice bag. But what's so bad about self-improvement, you may ask? Perhaps you have disagreeable character traits or weak knees that interfere with your functioning in everyday life. You may be eager to give up an addiction to cocaine or a habit of constantly interrupting the conversation of other people. But the very first habit you must give up is the habit of self-improvement. You can worry about the other things later. There may be a time and place in your life for self-improvement, but the Zendo is not the place, and now is not the time. Put it off. Giving up self-improvement is easier said than done. Each of us must walk this path alone, going nowhere. But as your teacher, I can suggest to you some skillful means by which you may at last break the habit of mending your ways, and I can offer you some guidelines by which you may measure your progress on this pathless path. I would like to ask that you take 2 weeks of your life to devote yourself to relinquishing self-betterment. If you consciously follow the Eightfold Path, which I here describe, I am confident you will be pleased with the lack of results. 1. As soon as you get up in the morning, stand before the mirror, look your reflection in the eye, and ask yourself 10 times, who wants to be a better person anyway? 2. Before going to sleep each night, tell yourself 10 times, every day, in every way, I am getting less attached to self-improvement. For these 2 weeks, withdraw from all therapy programs, yoga classes, harpsichord lessons, courses in wilderness survival, or other educational pursuits. There will be time to pick up where you left off when you are free from the need to achieve. For the duration of the program, do not follow any special diets. Make a half-hearted attempt to eat whatever is lying around the house forgotten. This is the time to use up the jar of cocktail onions, the stale crackers, the rest of those little silver balls for decorating cakes, and other such things you may find in the back of the cupboard. Walk slowly in place for 20 minutes a day. 5. Walk slowly in place for 20 minutes a day while repeating monotonously, there is no attainment with nothing to attain. It takes a full 20 minutes for your body to register the fact that it is not benefiting either from an increased heart rate or the secretion of stress-reducing epinephrines into the bloodstream. This is an advanced practice demanding constant mindfulness so that you don't go anywhere or get any exercise. At first, you may need to check your pulse periodically to be sure that it stays about the same. 6, keep a chart on which you daily mark as high or low your level of attachment in the following areas: mentally healthy interpersonal interactions, physical well-being, productive work, spiritual enlightenment. Remember, you are looking for low attachment, not high achievement. 7, from the daily TV program guide, select the program that interests you the least. Be honest with yourself. Then watch this program with a glazed expression. More advanced students should tape the program on a VCR and watch it a second time. 8, sit on a round black cushion and face the wall. Don't think about anything. Breathe. If you will follow these instructions with meticulous effort, you will find at the end of 2 weeks that you have not only failed to improve, but you have given up the very idea of self-improvement, perceiving it at last for the hopeless task it really is. I respectfully ask you not to waste your time. You may delude yourself by promising to give up self-improvement soon, after you've stopped biting your fingernails, lost 10 pounds, or learned to jitterbug. This is a trap. Tomorrow it may be too late. In the final stages of the disease, the sufferer loses all control, and those around him find themselves hiding course catalogs and health club brochures. Bushwhack told the young monk to take a nap immediately. Remember, you are perfect already, exactly as you are, in a manner of speaking. And if you were really perfect, you wouldn't have a friend in the world. So there's an extreme version of how to not be always trying to get something or gain something. So I will end there with some very different voices about our practice and how it can help us. And I would be interested in any comments or discussion or questions, whatever else. Shall I call on people, or is somebody else going to do that?
No, we will take care of that, Susan. Here in
Okay.
the house, I'll call on this bunch. And online, John Hinman will monitor the questions and comments in the chat and so forth. So let's start here. We have 3, I think of, you're one of her students? Do you have notes?
No, Sue, only from Everyday Zen. We shared a table for a week at Session last spring.
And you?
What's your name?
Pam. Sue, I don't think you can see me. It's Pam
Pam.
Metzger.
Hi, I see you very well. Hi, Pam.
Let's start with Pam.
So, Sue, it's wonderful to see you. I'm curious, could you talk a little bit about the challenge of asking for help? And as you
Thank you. That's a good question. And that's part of what I'm speaking about when I talk about adapting to getting old. And one of the things that it's important to learn to do is to ask for help. You know, we know it's important to give help when we can, but asking for help is also, it's very challenging, and some of us find it extremely difficult. I don't find it as difficult as some other people, but maybe because well, never mind. Anyway, it's really good thing to ask for help when you need help, when you're old or anytime you need help, because for one thing, you're modeling the fact to others that it's okay to ask for help. And that, you know, in this life, how do we get along as human beings if we're not helping each other? And we know it's good to help, but how can you help people if there's nobody who needs help? So we need both sides of that equation to keep going on, and we're all working together and helping each other. And in a way, it's just like the giver, the gift, and the receiver are all one thing as we chant that. So the helper and the helpee are really one thing happening. And another good thing about asking for help is that the person who, it's very satisfying to give help, and the person who's helping you is sometimes you've given them a gift of being able to help you. And that feels good to help someone you care about, maybe even someone you don't care about so much. So, and it also, you're not just doing it as a favor, you're doing it because maybe you need help, and help is really important. So that too is a good reason to ask for help, and to just see it in the context of being part of this human family that we're in. And also to understand that sometimes you might ask for help and the help you ask for might not be forthcoming. And this is how it is right now. But that doesn't mean you can't ask again, or you can try your best to adapt to the situation you're in, but you can ask again. And you can, in the meantime, help somebody else. So it's an ongoing thing. And I think it's a very important part of our practice. Thank you for asking that question, Pam.
John, over to you. We usually alternate, take turns.
Thank you, Hojo. For those of you online, if you have a question or a comment, feel free to raise your physical hand like this, or you could raise a digital hand by clicking the button at the bottom like this, or you could also put a question in the chat, and I'll try to recognize you in order of your responding. At the moment, we have a hand raised from Kuya.
Good to be here. So, Sue, I just counted how long it's been since our very first contact. And in 31 years, if you will recall, I was living in Burns Lake, northern BC, with a Zendo in a tent, a little red nylon tent, we were talking about turning wheel articles, and that's where we actually met, because I submitted something to Turning Wheel. So 31 years, but this is the very first time we've been in synchronous time together, even though we're not in synchronous space.
Yeah.
And it's so lovely to, I've done so much since COVID, we've done so much online work that there's a word for it, I can't think of it right now, which talks about feeling through the internet. And I'm really feeling your presence right now, and I'm very moved. Thank you very much.
Well, it's wonderful to see you, Kuya, and I've been aware of you and your writing and your practice for 31 years, you say it is, and I remember publishing your writing in Turning Wheel, and I have always been so full of respect and admiration for the courage of your practice, and including going out into the wilderness and being really physically brave and in your tent, so on, and then your very strong feminist practice. I was very appreciative of that. I'm sure it continues. And what was the name of your Zen center? That it had a really good name.
Amazenji.
Oh yeah, Amazenji, like Amazon.
Ama being the Japanese word for the moment of total union at the baby at the breast.
Amazen. Yeah. What a great name for a Sangha. Anyway, great to see you.
I'm not in a red silk tent anymore, and this is now my Zendo.
Wow, beautiful.
It's in my backyard, and we're just starting. I'm just returning now to scheduled practice. You're my first event for the new year.
Where do you live now?
Preston, British Columbia, just about 13 miles north of the U.S. border, bordering on Idaho.
Well, thank you for your practice and your teaching.
Thank you.
Over to us.
Mhm.
Introduce yourself. Don't be shy.
Hey. Hi, my name's Liza. I just wanted to say that I'm very guilty of falling into that trap of self-improvement in different ways. So I found your final section of your talk very humorous, and I'll think back on it as I'm falling into that trap in my life.
Well, thank you. You can also always take up that 2-week training period, just as it suggested.
Right, right.
Thank you. It's good to try and reduce our mind of self-improvement, which is so strong. Yeah. Thank you. I'm wondering if anybody also has any comments of their own that they would like to mention about some surprises they've had about aging, some positive, joyful surprises that have come from aging that you may have noticed, or any stories you want to share from your own lives.
We have
I don't
a
know
hand
anything.
up from Sean.
Who is it? Sean?
Sean Evans.
Can't hear you. You're muted, Sean.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I love too that you spoke about, these different voices in your own practice that have come kind of back full circle too with Tofu Roshi. I was an early fan. And in thinking about my own aging and thinking about our practice and our Zen coming to America lineage and history. I was ordained in a different lineage and had to leave because I was so disappointed in some of the financial mismanagement and some of the hierarchical power configurations, and also I didn't know at the time, but it did feel that there was something else going on that was maybe about teacher-student relationships, and it was not good, and I felt very sorry, and for many years didn't really say much about it as I looked for a different teacher and a different way to return to full-time practice. And as I've gotten older, I really have realized, as you have talked about being informed by every kind of ancestor I've had. And I loved my original teachers, and I still love them, and I can feel that, and I can feel the sorrow and the regret, and I really want to just acknowledge the harm that was done to some people. I did not personally receive harm, but I think that as I get older, the understanding of our in general humanness, that they are human, and we if we are enlightened this lifetime or a future lifetime, we've all been human. And I really, as you were doing the Dogen prayer, it's one that means a lot to me too. And I just wanted to say, how hard in terms of the transmission east to west, so much cultural overlay, so much patriarchy, and then the kind of wonderful changes that have occurred here, and we have a long way to go. But you've been such a part of that shift in consciousness, and thank you, just in your beingness. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you for your wonderful practice and leadership. And I do want to say, yeah, that acknowledging that ancestors may have done bad things, but they're still our ancestors. And making all these jokes about bushwhack on Lazy Man Mountain and stuff is in no way turning away from the practice of the precepts, which is completely essential and which we all need to hold each other to as best we can. So it's wonderful that you put it very clearly and how important it is to both understand the humanness of all of us and that we've all made mistakes and all the ancestors made mistakes. And again, to renew our intention not to make those, not to harm others. Thank you for that.
And then you ended with love. That was
Yeah.
really important because I've heard recently, if you loved someone at one point, you always have that love. And I've thought a lot about that and, chewed on that for a while. So I think that for me is very true, that I can feel that love for the original teachers. And I can feel the love for ancestors who I've never met, So,
Yeah.
Thanks.
Great. Go back to find love inside of everything else. Yeah.
Oh, Joe, do you have someone?
Please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Shoko, and I'm from Japan. So this is the ancestor wise. It's in my, it's engraved in me. So yeah, it's interesting to hear from somebody from a different culture, actually, the Western culture, and then started mm, you know, uh, appreciating Sue said, the lineage and that connection, and it's to me. It's very. From a different perspective, and it's interesting to hear what
Well,
you.
thank you very much. And I appreciate your words and I appreciate your presence and your perspective. And yes, I imagine you have a very different perspective on listening to a Western woman talking about her feelings about the ancestors. And we want to be a Sangha that includes people from all different communities, and particularly Japanese Zen Buddhists. What is more important for us to feel close to? So anyway, thank you for speaking up and being with us and part of the Sangha here.
Thank you.
On our side, we've got a hand up from Linda.
Good morning, Sue.
Morning, Linda.
So first I want to mention a delightful, unexpected thing that just happened while I was listening to John. John has a vase in which I think is a flower back there, but to me, it looked like a stalk of broccoli. And I just was enjoying seeing it as a stalk of broccoli. And I thought maybe I could put a stalk of broccoli in a vase. Thank you, John.
Look at it, Linda.
It was such a pleasant, unexpected little experience. So I thought I'd mention that before I get to my serious question, which is for Tofu Roshi. And this is the question: if I give up self-improvement, will I be a better person?
Oh, no, don't worry. Yeah, it's kind of like your only problem is you think you shouldn't have problems. And the only way to give up self-improvement truly is to know that you will never improve yourself, even by giving up improvement. But of course, there's also the famous quote from Suzuki Roshi: "You're all perfect exactly as you are. You're already perfect exactly as you are, and you could use a little improvement." So both those things
Run
go.
the silence.
Oh,
All right.
I'm wondering if we should take just one more. I will, or if whoever has that right now, take them. And
we have one here. Val is here to.
There, Susan, thank you so much for being here. First, kudos for the article in Lion's Roar.
oh,
Good job on the bit about time. And then I was thrilled after reading that to hear that you were going to be here. So I got both your books. And then I've also had the honor of meeting Florence Caplow and starting to study the hidden lamp when I was at the Santa Fe Sangha.
okay, good.
For a short while. So all of that was wonderful and came together. So I'm just thrilled to have you here. And it was so clever of you to read those. So just thank you very much. That's my only comment.
Well,
Keep
thank
doing
you.
it, you know, and I expect to hear from you in 10 or 20 years that you're still doing this.
Well, we'll see about that. I'm glad you mentioned Florence and Upaya, because just to make note of the fact, Florence is doing an ongoing teaching series at Upaya on studying and writing about the koans in the hidden lamp. So I think, and she's a wonderful teacher, and I encourage people who are interested in the hidden lamp and the early women ancestors to go to Upaya and find out when her teaching sessions happen.
Thank you.
And maybe Steve, can we end with you, or I don't want to go on too long. Yeah.
Is Shiro?
It's Shiro.
Is it my turn? And I wanted everybody to notice that I've given up trying to be enthusiastic by asking the first question. Sue, as I said, that this is a wonderful opportunity for me. And you brought home in your final words, I think, of the relationship that I feel that I've had with you, and that the importance of ancestors. And when I first read Tofu Roshi, I was a beginning student, and many of the things in that still speak to me. They remind me of being a beginning student. Who's going to take the shoe rack? Can you steal a better pair of Birkenstocks? It being Berkeley. And what I thought is, well, someday I'm going to catch up with Sue. And somehow I never have, and I'm still younger than you are. You're still more experienced. You're leading the way into old age, which I don't like to say about myself, but that's I have a new hearing aid that I just got this week. So I guess that was the last step. That of any of the contemporary writers, I think that your teaching in its simplicity and in its humor has been the most significant for me. And having a teacher who is a woman has been very important for me. In my day job, most of the, which is a university professor, most of the people are male, except that in my particular sub area, we do have a lot of women. And so it is wonderful to have women mentors, women teachers. So I wanted to thank you for that. And I'm glad that we got an updated answer. Thank you, Linda, for asking Tofu Roshi for a question. Someday I will think of one and send it on to you, Sue. But is there a question in this? I can hear Hojo saying we're looking for a question, but no, and I look forward to your next book and the one after that and the one after that and the one after that.
Oh, well, Ishiryo, thank you so much for inviting me. And you may not have caught up to me in chronological years. You probably never will, no matter how much older you get. But I don't feel that I'm ahead of you in any other way. We're all part of this conversation together, and we make the conversation happen together. And it's really a joy to be here at the Atlanta Zen Center online, even as a little postage stamp. It's an honor to be here. So thank you so much. I've enjoyed this.
And the next time I'm in Berkeley, I'm going to seek you out. When I'm in Berkeley, I practice at the Empty Gate.
Oh, good. Yeah. Well,
So-
I know that place and I know those people, so that's great.
Lovely people. Thank
Jeff is a friend too. Yeah. Well, thank you all.
Any final comment or question inside the center or online before we close?
I just wanted to say thank you, Susan. Ask your Dharma name. What is your Dharma name?
It's if I can remember it, hold it. It's Reigetsu Myoko, and it means moon. Well, it used to mean moon pond, but then it got changed to a different name. So luminous moon, wondrous light.
I was wondering if it might be Tsuki. I named one of my
Oh, that's a
students
good name for moon. Yeah.
Tsuki.
Yeah.
Yep. The story you told in the beginning of the monk who died standing on his head is one of my favorites.
Oh,
And the way I heard it end is they buried him upside down.
oh,
And
I didn't remember that. That's great. So glad you
always-
that footnote.
I
That
think
head.
that was in Trevor Leggett's novels or his Zen stories. And I've always wondered if that was the inspiration for Till Eulenspiegel, who also dies and is buried upside down.
Oh, I didn't know about that. I don't know about that.
Yep.
That's a very important note that you added to that koan, and I don't know if I even knew that. If I did, I'd forgotten it. Thank you for completing it for us.
So we'd like to invite you back anytime that you're willing to come online and give us another illuminating talk. With that, I'll say Gasho, and John will have some closing remarks and ask you if you have any closing remarks you'd like to make. Something you did not talk about.
Well, I just want to say that this is a very difficult time, and other times have been difficult in the past, but we always think our time is the most difficult. But it seems like it is extremely difficult in many ways, and that as we go forward into this new year, it's just all the more important for us to attend to each other and love each other and care for each other and do our practice together and not be alone with this. We can encourage
Thank you
each
so much. Thank you.
Sue?
John usually
Yes,
does.
Sue, after the formal session ends, a few of us often linger for a more informal, relaxed conversation for a few minutes. And I'd like to invite you to join us for that, along with anyone else who has a few minutes and has an interest in talking with you a little less formally.
Well, I could do that in a few minutes, yeah.
Thank you.
Let's start.
Can I say hi to Mary too?
For call. There's programs we have here online.
Okay.
Oh, the best of the online program. There's a retreat coming up this weekend, might be.
I'm kept hearing.
I don't think anyone's talking here yet. Oh, directly to you. They're not really.
I've thought, Sue, sometimes when I decided I was going to contact a Zen center, I was back in Berkeley to do some work. And I'm trying to remember exactly how I chose the center that I did, but eventually I realized that I lived on Spruce Street, and there was a big blue house on the next street, and I used to hear this rhythmic thwacking, like somebody was hitting a piece of wood with another piece of wood. And I never knew what that was until years later.
That was on Arch Street.
I'm sorry?
That on Arch?
That was on Arch Street. I think that they were on the Zen Empty Gate at those days was on Arch Street, and I was on Spruce Street.
I remember that.
And so I thought that years later, I thought that there's some sort of karmic connection because I've been hearing the thwacking all these years.
It was with you.
And so the consequence was that when I sought out a center, I went there rather than going to the Berkeley Zen Center. And I often wonder what the difference in pathways would have been if I had gone this place or that place. So yeah, it is.
Well, I've gotten a lot from your lineage too, and I love some of Sansanim's teachings about don't know mind in particular, only don't know. I appreciate that a lot.
I think it was useful for me to have a really exotic looking teacher. Like Sun Sun, if you're gonna do an exotic religion.
Yeah.
I can remember coming off a retreat with a group of us that had silently agreed the first thing after we do the final vows, we'll go for pizza. And we were still dressed in our robes, and we went to the pizza place, and a Jehovah's Witness came up and tried to convert us, and we looked at him and said, no, thank you, we already have our own weird religion.
I'm surprised that he tried, even seeing you in all your robes.
I think maybe we were a special target for that reason.
I see. Let me ask you, Ishiryo, what is your field academically?
The short version is evolutionary genetics. So I did my PhD at Berkeley in '83, and came to, well, the usual, not wanting to give a Dharma talk here, but the usual thing of, okay, now what? This is what I have been devoted to all of my life. Now I've got it. What do I do? And that put me on the path to Zen, and thinking that Zen would answer, finding out that Zen did answer some of those things, and yeah, keep coming back for more teaching and more depth. And
well, genetic evolution sounds like it would be really fascinating and very much in depth about questions about life and the meaning of life. And I should think it would be a really interesting path. I've been.
I can recommend, yeah. I'm sorry, and that I'm trying to give up my bad habit of interrupting people's conversation, which
what do you recommend?
Hojo has a book out. He's got 2 books out. The second one is The Razor Blade of Zen.
Oh, yes.
And I had the privilege of, in fact, that was how I first got to know him, that I had the privilege of helping him do some edits on the science parts of that, and realizing there's an evolutionary perspective on things, and there is a Zen perspective on things, and they're not necessarily contradictory. Well, they're not contradictory because since there's only one thing, nothing can contradict it. And it's the way that we talk about it. And I found myself, now here's another horrible habit, is that you talked about adapting. And I found myself thinking, well, that's not adapting. I wouldn't accept that answer. That she's talking about adjusting. So when you put the mouse in the environmental chamber to measure its metabolic rate, the mouse adjusts.
Yes.
If you wanted to take the mouse into a cold climate and let it make baby mice that have more fur, that would be adapting. And
that I appreciate it. I stand see from the point of view of evolutionary thinking that adaptation means something quite different than what I said. So
It's
thanks
that, yeah.
for adjusting.
And we see the levels, and what any of us can do in our lives is we adjust to circumstances, but what we do with our relationship to our ancestors, and realizing that, well, I don't want to monopolize the conversation, but one of the papers I'm doing some work with the First Nations tribe, where the necessity is to establish a connection with the tribe that was in place prior to the coming of Europeans. And if that connection is established, then they will get considerably more rights than they have now under the Canadian law. But there they have to emphasize that almost everybody, we talk about ancestors, and an ancestor would be your grandparent or your great grandparent, or in the case of the mitochondrial Eve, your great great great, and then you can stop me after any number of greats, which she actually is an ancestor, but most of us are actually cousins.
Steve,
And we're cousins. I know.
Let's let one or two of the others slip in for a minute, if you don't mind. Corolla. Corolla is one of our future coabits. I think I'm saying that right. Just curious, anything in particular come up for you as you listen to Sue this morning?
Well, I am a long-term fan of Tofu Roshi. I may even have a first edition of him. I was very much struck by that one line of, your problem is that you think that you shouldn't have a problem. And I really appreciated that. These days, we all have this sense of